Salam, peace be upon you. My name is Mohammed Layiq Sediqi, the father of Holophase. Remember the language we are learning. There is one field, phi, the holophase, one continuous cyclic movement from which all of reality unfolds. When phi begins to change, its first derivatives appear, and with them the three dimensions show themselves at once. Time as omega, space as k, and motion as v, built from both. Every higher derivative is a finer question about how phi changes, and each one casts three shadows together: a time shadow, a space shadow, and a motion shadow. These echoes mix and weave into one another, forming the patterns we call fields, particles, bodies, thoughts, and worlds. In this picture, everything that exists is a living tapestry of phi, endlessly echoing through its derivatives and their dimensional shadows. Today, we focus on one essential component of the epistemic firewall. In this part 33, we confront the deepest and most consequential form of failure. We define misspecification diagnostics. This is the firewall mechanism that detects when the entire conceptual framework, the family of models we are using, is fundamentally inadequate to describe phi's behavior in a given regime. The core revelation is stark and liberating. Misspecification means, within the declared admissible grammar family, no candidate rule can account for observed residual structure, even after scope correction, pipeline auditing, and representation checks. The skill you will gain is that of a paradigm pathologist. You will learn to recognize when persistent, structured failure points not to a flawed rule, but to a flawed rulebook, when the very language you are speaking is too poor to capture the melody of phi. Our core question is precise. How do we know when repeated, systematic failure is due to a bad rule within our model family versus when it is due to a bad model family itself? This question targets the foundational layer of scientific inquiry. We do not approach phi naked. We approach it with a model class or a grammar family. This is the set of allowable forms for our rules, defined by a set of primitives, operations, and allowable relationships. In HLS Meta, this is the admissible grammar registry. For example, in classical mechanics, the model class might be systems describable by forces that are functions of position and velocity, obeying Newton's second law. In economics, it might be models where agents maximize utility with rational expectations. This model class defines the space of possible stories we can tell about phi. Misspecification occurs when the true data generating process, the actual behavior of phi, lies outside this admissible model class. No amount of tweaking parameters, adding epicycles, or narrowing scope within that class will yield a rule that fits the data well. The residuals, the differences between prediction and observation, will remain large and, crucially, structured. They will contain predictable patterns that the model family is inherently incapable of capturing. Why is this diagnostic necessary? The failure mode it prevents is the wasteful pursuit of ghosts within a dead paradigm. It stops us from adding endless complications to a broken framework, from inventing dark this and hidden that to patch a model whose basic architecture is wrong. It forces the revolutionary but disciplined step of changing the language itself, rather than writing longer, more convoluted sentences in a language that cannot express the truth. In holophase terms, we have phi. We choose a representation, a way of parsing phi into variables and derivatives. This defines our model class M. From observations, we try to infer a rule G elemine of M. G is a member of the model class M. We get residuals. Epsilon equals C data minus G resenting. If epsilon is large and exhibits structured patterns across omega, k, and v, that do not vanish after we correct for measurement errors, sentence failure, verify pipeline consistency, rotate tacit assumptions, and ensure we are within a well-defined, plausible scope, then we are likely facing misspecification. The model class M is wrong. In the tri-unity, misspecification leaves a clear signature. Structured residuals across omega kV that do not vanish under honest corrections. For example, structured residuals. The arrows show a consistent periodicity or trend over time that no seasonal adjustment or autoregressive term in the model can capture. The model family lacks the necessary temporal degrees of freedom. K-structured residuals. The errors correlate with spatial location or some geometric feature not included in the model's variables. The model's spatial representation is too coarse or misses a key dimension. V-structured residuals. The errors correlate with velocity or momentum in a way the model's dynamical equations cannot reproduce. The model's coupling terms are of the wrong functional form. This connects decisively to energy as tele, a persistent energy accounting mismatch that cannot be repaired by scope narrowing or pipeline correction is a classic sign of misspecification. If you keep finding missing energy in your ledgers and you've checked all the meter readings and accounting rules, the problem may be that your entire ledger system is wrong for this economy. You're using a barter ledger for a credit-based economy. The missing energy is not a hidden substance. It is a signal that your model class does not include the correct categories of transaction, the correct omega k vary v couplings to balance the books. The operational interpretation is the statistical practice of model specification tests, like Ramsey's reset test, test for heteroscedasticity or autocorrelation in residuals, and the physical intuition that drives paradigm shifts. Before Einstein, physicists tried to fix the mismatch in the speed of light, a V residual, within the model class of Newtonian mechanics and the ether. No tweak worked. The residuals were structured and persistent. This was misspecification. The model class itself, mechanics with absolute space and time, was inadequate. Special relativity proposed the new model class, mechanics with a constant speed of light and relativistic spacetime, within which the residual vanished. The firewall role, therefore, is that of the model class auditor. When all rules within a licensed model class M are failing in a systematic way for a given domain, the firewall initiates a misspecification diagnostic. It asks, have we exhausted the flexibility of model class M? Do the residuals contain systematic, modelable information that M cannot capture? If yes, the verdict is misspecification. The response is not to try harder within M, but to seek a new, admissible model class, M prime. Let us formalize this. Let the true data generating process be TIFA. Let our model class be M, a set of functions. Misspecification means TIFA is not an element of M and is not even close, in a measurable sense, to any element of M. The distance, dTm, is large. No matter which G element M we choose, the error T minus G remains above a threshold of acceptability, and the error vector T minus G is not random noise. It has a projection onto patterns that M cannot represent. The firewall's check is to test if the residuals epsilon from the best fit model G best element M are white noise, unstructured, unpredictable. If epsilon is white noise, the model may be adequate, though not necessarily uniquely correct. If epsilon has structured, predictable components, the model is misspecified. You can often predict the residuals using information the model ignored. Let us state with crystalline clarity what is allowed and what is forbidden at this gate. What is allowed? You are allowed to work within a well-defined model class. You are allowed to try to fit data within it, When you encounter persistent structured residuals, you are required to perform misspecification diagnostics. You are allowed to expand the model class to a more flexible one, M prime, provided the expansion stays within the holophase ontology. No new primitives, still phi and derivatives. This is like moving from linear models to polynomial models. What is forbidden? You may not. Ignore structured residuals, attributing them to noise or complexity without testing. Add ad hoc fixes to a model that introduce new primitives or violate the grammar of M just to fit the residuals. This is smuggling a new model class. Claim a model is adequate when its residuals are clearly predictable from its own inputs or other variables. Persist in using a model class for a domain where it has been diagnostically shown to be misspecified. What happens when the check fails? The license consequence is severe and forward-looking. Fail. Retire the model class for this domain, move to a new admissible registry family, still fee closed, and document the failure mode. The entire model class M is blacklisted for the problematic regime. Its license to describe that part of phi is revoked. Researchers are directed to explore new model classes M prime that are still expressed in terms of phi and its derivatives, but with different functional forms, variables, or coupling structures. The specific failure mode, the structure of the residuals, is documented as the key clue for building a better model class. Now, we must state the explicit prediction and falsification for the misspecification concept. Prediction, if the model class is misspecified. No matter how you tune parameters or select different models within the family M, residuals remain structured and repeatable across independent measurement windows. The omega pKV mismatch persists. You cannot make it go away by fitting better within M. The prediction is invariant failure across the model family. Falsification condition for a claim of misspecification. If expanding the model class M to a more general but still admissible family M prime, for example, adding higher order terms, allowing more variables, using a more general functional form, eliminates the structured residuals and yields stable omega kPav coherence, then the original problem was not misspecification. It was insufficient flexibility within an otherwise correct model class. The falsification is resolution by honest generalization within the phi ontology. A profound historical example is the failure of classical pre-quantum atomic models. In the late 19th century, the model class was classical electrodynamics and mechanics. Within this class, physicists tried to model the atom as a tiny solar system, the Rutherford model. This model class made a clear prediction. The orbiting electron should radiate energy continuously, an omega V process, and spiral into the nucleus in a fraction of a second. This was a catastrophic, structured failure, not just a parameter off, but a prediction of non-existence for stable matter. No tweak within classical electrodynamics could fix it. The residuals, the very existence of stable atoms, were a massive structured signal. This was misspecification. The model class itself was inadequate for the atomic regime. Quantum mechanics introduced a new model class with wave functions, quantization, and probabilistic interpretation. Still, ultimately about phi patterns, but with a radically different constrained grammar. Within this new class, stable atoms emerged naturally. Let us explore an analogy from the challenges of governance and administrative rulemaking in a diverse, multi-ethnic society like Afghanistan, particularly in designing a uniform national civil procedure code in the early 20th century. The model class M is centralized Napoleonic-style civil code. This family of rules is characterized by written universal statutes, professional judges applying the code, a hierarchical court system, and abstract general legal principles. It is a powerful, coherent model class that worked well in the homogenizing nation-states of Europe. In the 1920s, Afghan modernizers attempt to apply this model class mean to the entire country to unify and modernize the legal system. They draft a civil code based on this framework. However, in vast rural areas, particularly among Pashtun tribes, the actual social governance pin pattern operates under a different, ancient model class, Pashtun Wali, a complex, oral, customary law based on principles of hospitality, asylum, revenge, and counsel, jirga, arbitration. It is not a set of universal statutes, but a context-sensitive relational grammar. The new centralized code is applied. Persistent structured residuals appear. Omega residuals. Cases take far longer than the code predicts, as parties bypass courts for jirgas, a timing mismatch. K residuals. In tribal regions, the code's judgments are ignored or unenforceable, a spatial structural mismatch. The dynamics of conflict resolution, mediation, negotiation, blood money, do not follow the code's adversarial winner-take-all process, a procedural mismatch. The modernizers initially tried to fix this within Model Class M. They send more police to enforce judgments. They simplify procedures. They educate the population about the new law. Yet, the residuals remain. The failure is structured and systematic. The code's predictions about social order consistently deviate from observed reality in these regions. A wise legal scholar, acting as a paradigm pathologist, performs the misspecification diagnostic. She asks, is there any rule within the centralized Napoleonic code family that can account for the enduring strength of Pashtun Valley in its home territory? After serious analysis, the answer is no. The two systems have incommensurate primitives. One is based on the individual and the state, the other on the kinship group and honor. One seeks uniform verdicts, the other seeks restorative equilibrium. Prediction of misspecification confirmed. No tuning of the centralized code within its class can eliminate the structured residual of customary law adherence. License consequence. The model class uniform centralized code for all territories is retired for the tribal regions. It is blacklisted as a misspecified framework for governing those social fee patterns. This does not mean law is abandoned. It means a new, meta-model class must be adopted. One candidate is legal pluralism or subsidiarity, a model class that allows for multiple, coexisting legal grammars within a broader constitutional framework with rules about which grammar applies in which context, a kind of scope object for law itself. This new class is still within the governance ontology, but has a different functional form. The falsification condition would be if a more flexible version of the centralized code, for example, one with special tribal courts that still applied state law but with culturally sensitive procedures, eventually succeeded and made customary law irrelevant. This would show the original model class was sufficient, just poorly implemented. But history suggests genuine misspecification, a fundamental mismatch in social ontology. In Holophase science, the social order is a fee pattern. The centralized code and Pashtunwali are two different model classes for generating rules within that pattern. Trying to force one onto a territory where the other is deeply embedded in the fee structure leads to invariant structured failure. The diagnostic recognizes this and forces a shift to a model class that can encompass the complexity, perhaps a higher-level grammar about the interaction of legal systems. This discipline is the ultimate application of the episode 11 axioms. Rules do not become real by elegance, consensus, or tradition. They earn a license only by surviving falsification, variation, independence, and scope discipline. Misspecification diagnostics is the final enforcement of these axioms upon the framework itself. When all rules within a framework fail systematically, The framework itself has not earned a license for that domain. We must not believe in the framework harder, we must change the framework. And the cardinal rule: when a rule fails, we do not believe harder. We tighten, downgrade, or retire its license. At the level of misspecification, we retire the license of the entire model class for that domain. We downgrade it from a candidate for universal description to a useful tool in a more limited scope. We move on. The skill you gain from this part is framework skepticism. You learn to look beyond the failure of individual rules to the failure of the rule-making machinery itself. You become sensitive to the shape of residuals. You understand that the most important signal is often not in the model's success, but in the pattern of its consistent failure. This skill is what drives true scientific revolutions and profound social innovations. This skill has immediate, vital application. In climate modeling, if a class of climate models, for example, all models with a certain cloud parameterization, consistently underestimates Arctic amplification in a structured way, it may be a sign of misspecification in that parameterization class, not just bad parameters. If a whole family of macroeconomic models, for example, DSGE models with rational expectations, consistently fails to predict or explain major financial crises, showing persistent V residuals in credit flows, it may be misspecification. The search turns to new model classes incorporating complex systems or behavioral dynamics. If all models of brain function based on simple neural network nodes fail to capture certain cognitive phenomena, like the global workspace of consciousness with structured residuals, it may indicate misspecification, the need for a model class with different primitives, for example, integrated information theory. If a class of models, for example, standout convolutional neural networks, consistently fails on certain types of out-of-distribution images with specific geometric distortions, K-residuals, it may indicate a misspecification in the architectural inductive biases, prompting a shift to different architectures, for example, vision transformers. Finally, let us summarize the epistemic function of this part. Let us crystallize what we have built. We have defined misspecification diagnostics. This is the firewall mechanism that detects when the entire family of models, the grammar class, being used is fundamentally inadequate to describe phi in a given regime, evidenced by persistent, structured residuals that survive all lower-level corrections. The firewall acts as a model class auditor. It forces the retirement of an entire modeling framework for a domain when diagnostic tests show that no member of that family can capture the structured patterns in the data. The explicit prediction for misspecified model class is invariant failure, structured, repeatable residuals across all candidate rules within the family. The explicit falsification condition for misspecification claim is resolution by honest generalization. Expanding the model family while staying phi-closed eliminates the structured residuals, proving the original class was just too narrow. The license consequence is paradigm shift. The old model class is retired for that domain, and research is directed to a new admissible grammar family with the failure mode documented as the essential guide. This strengthens the firewall by giving it metastability. The firewall is not just a filter for rules within a paradigm. It is a mechanism for triggering and managing paradigm shifts itself. It prevents science from getting eternally stuck in a conceptually neat but empirically inadequate worldview. It ensures that the process of understanding phi can evolve not just in its content, but in its very form. With misspecification diagnostics, the epistemic firewall is now complete. It can filter candidate rules, diagnose their failures, map their boundaries, and, when necessary, condemn the entire conceptual language they are written in and demand a new one. This is how science remains sane, progressive, and ultimately truthful. Yet this very power creates a final meta-danger. If we can change paradigms, How do we prevent self-deception in that process? How do we stop from leaping to new, fancy model classes for every little hiccup? We need rules about rules. We need metagates. Salam and peace be upon you.